Back in 2007, a paper published on the journal Evolution showed us that the horn length of bovid species are correlated to their group size, which means that the larger the groups that these species live in, the larger the horns that the males will have. And when I say males, it's just because the same correlation was not found for females. So, since 2007, we know that the intensity of sexual selection predicts the weapon size in male bovids. Later that same year, a paper published on the journal Biology Letters showed that there was a positive correlation between the opportunity for sexual selection and the amount of rainfall during the mating season of seals. So, the years that rained the most were also the years where sexual selection was stronger in those seals. But what these studies have in common? I mean, one of them is about male weapons, the other one is about sexual selection and rainfall. So, we're going to discover what these two studies have in common in this talk. So I'm Alex, I'm a researcher in Brazil, and today we're going to talk about animal weapons. What both of these studies have in common is that they are centered on the monopolization of females by males, which bring us back to the seminal paper by Emling and Oring in 1977, in which they relate the temporal availability of mates to the spatial distribution of resources, which is the graph that you can see on your screen, in which as mates increasing their asynchronicity to mate, and as resources become more clumped in space, it increases the overall monopolization that one individual can exert on that resource. So, more monopolization means that typically the males will be fighting more often to monopolize those resources. And by fighting, males will likely invest more on weapons because weapons help them win fights. When we are talking about the temporal availability of mates or females in this case, we are talking about the mating season. The length of that mating season will probably have a lot to do with the synchronicity of the female, because longer mating seasons allow the females to become more asynchronous in their availability, which makes the males more eager to fight for them because they can monopolize them. But in areas in which the mating seasons are shorter, we expect more synchronous availability because the females do not have that amount of time to mate, so they have to make most of their short time to mate. And one of the variables that are typically associated with the length of the mating season is the seasonality of the environment, because environments that are highly seasonal have a shorter mating season for the animals in which the conditions are good for them to mate. Animals rarely mate during the autumn or the winter. They are typically mating during the summer and the spring in environments that are seasonal. So we expect that environments that have low seasonality, that are more stable, to have longer breeding seasons than environments that are more seasonal. And if low seasonality is correlated to longer mating seasons, we also expect that low seasonality environments also have more asynchronous availability of females, which make the females that live in high seasonality environments to have more synchronous availability. Thus, when we correlate the potential for monopolization or weapon size, such as how much the animals are investing in monopolization to seasonality, we expect a negative relationship because species that live in low seasonality environments will probably have larger weapons because they're fighting more, because females are more monopolizable than females that are in shorter breeding seasons. To test this idea, we use the freshwater anomurans of the genus Aegla, which are endemic to southern South America. And we chose this group because the females do not clump around resources, so we don't have to worry about the spatial distribution of the resources because females are not using any resource for reproduction and they are not clumping around resources. So we only need to worry about their temporal availability. And we know that species differ in the length of their mating season. Lastly, the males also use their claws as weapons in a mating context. To collect the data for our study, we searched the literature for log-log allometries of claw size and body size, and we gathered the slope, because the slope of this relationship is a proxy for how much the males are allocating their energy to the claws. But since females also have claws, we gathered data for both of them. In the end, we had 16 species in our sample and data for both males and females on their claw sizes. So we predict a negative effect for males because seasonality should influence mating season and should influence how much they invest in weapons. But the same thing doesn't apply for females. So we actually have an effect and a non-effect as a prediction. What we found can be seen on this graph, where we have the slope coefficient on the y-axis and the range seasonality on the x-axis. As you can see, we have a negative relationship for the males, represented in green, and a non-significant relationship for the females, represented in orange. And if you pull up the slopes that the analysis gave us with their confidence intervals, you can see that the males have a negative slope that does not overlap 0, while the female has a negative slope that overlaps 0. The take-home message from our work is that male freshwater anomurans allocate less energy to weapons in more seasonal environments, probably because they have less benefits for fighting for these females when the mating season is shorter. Thanks for listening in. Here's my email and have a good one.